Okay, welcome to the first podcast, screencast, whatever you like to call it, of mine, about the poems in the Time and Place collection from the new EDEXCEL 1 to 9 GCSE Poetry Anthology. So if you're currently in Year 10 in 2016, then this will be very relevant to you if you are studying the Time and Place collection C of the anthology. So my job today is to talk to you a little bit about Where the Picnic Was by Thomas Hardy. You should by now have done a little bit of background research and done some reading into the man himself. Thomas Hardy lived well into his 80s and wrote an awful lot of novels, short stories and poems. He also wrote a few plays. A very prolific writer and one of the greats of the modern time. He's buried in Poets' Corner in Westminster Abbey, but his heart is buried in Dorset. So let's get on with this poem, shall we? And I'll talk to you about what you can see. So, first verse. Where we made the fire in the summertime of branch and briar, on the hill to the sea I slowly climb, through winter mire and scan and trace the forsaken place quite readily. So you can see around the edge of my slide here I've got some questions, and I'm hoping to answer these questions for you as part of this screencast. So the first thing that I want you to look at is now to pause this playback for a moment or two and annotate the rhyme scheme. So look for matching pairs of rhymes. Are they alternate rhymes? Are they in pairs? How does it work? Okay, pause now. Okay, I'm going to carry on talking. So if you haven't paused, you haven't had time to do the annotation. So I hope you've had a look at the rhyme scheme. So the rhyme echoes here. For my mind anyway, the rhyme echoes the ebb and flow of waves on the beach, or perhaps the slow, steady treading of the man as he climbs the hill. On the hill to the sea he slowly climbs. So the rhythm either echoes the moving of his feet or the movement of the waves and the sea. Either way, the question is, why climb slowly? Well, as we move through the poem, we begin to appreciate that he's going back to somewhere not just physically but also emotionally and mentally, and he goes back to the forsaken place. There's lots of winter words here. So where we made the fire in the summertime, he slowly climbed through winter mire. So we've got the comparison between summer and winter. So you can think about the juxtaposition of those two seasons and what that might tell you about his emotional state, and also think about the way that the rhyme is used here to make us think about the way he's moving, and the way he's moving methodically and slowly up that hill to the forsaken place. Think about that word, forsaken. It's not a word that we use lightly. When someone is forsaken, they are left on purpose and abandoned almost. When he says quite readily, I want you to think about the significance of that. I know what I think, but what do you think? Now verse 2. He's standing at the top now. He's made his way to that place. Now a cold wind blows and the grass is grey, but the spot still shows as a burnt circle, and stick ends, charred, still strewn the sward whereon I stand, last relic of the band who came that day. Now, there's a lot of alliteration here. Either alliteration with your opening initial sounds of the words as you're used to seeing it, but there's also a lot of repeated consonants, and vowel sounds. So a cold wind blows. Think about that. We've got the L's and the D's and the W's repeating, and that repeats the kind of sensation that we have perhaps when we hunch up and the cold wind is blowing at us. So not only is Thomas Hardy giving us an image that we can visualize, he's also giving us an image that we can feel. We're thinking about how that cold wind feels when it blows on us. If you just remember what it's like when you get an unexpected gust down the back of your neck, you begin to realize exactly what it is he's going for here, or at least what I think he's going for here. The next line, and the grass is grey. So there's your classic alliteration there. Grass is grey, again echoing the summertime, the loss of colour, the loss of vibrancy, and of course the loss of green, which equals the loss of life. That comes a little later on, but that should give you a bit of foreshadowing about what's going on with the rest of this poem. But the spot still shows sibilance, as a burnt circle, as a burnt circle. And stick ends charred, still strewn the sward whereon I stand. How much S sibilance is going on in that little section. Think about what sibilance also echoes to you: the noise of wind in grass, the swooshing of waves on a beach, the noise as the waves hit and crash into the base of the cliff. Remember, he's on the hill above the sea, so there's a long way down to the sea, so that could be echoing some of that noise and some of the wind. And you think about the cold wind blowing and the grey grass. Everything is swishing and swooshing and blowing around in the wintry weather, and all that sibilance helps to create the sound effect that conveys that. So pause now, read it over, and underline every place where you can see an S there. And think about how many times he uses it in just those few lines. So we're talking about the lines that go from here as a burnt circle I, and of course you can use that circle C because it makes the S sound, and stick ends child still shrewd the sward whereon I stand. So think about those 4 lines. Okay. Hopefully you've paused and restarted. If you haven't, you're not doing what I asked you to do. Anyway, last relic of the band who came that day. Now, it doesn't mean people with musical instruments. It means the group of friends. Last relic of the band who came that day. So I want you to think about the word relic for a moment. If I was to say to you it's a relic of the past, what would you think about? Hopefully you're thinking to yourself, you think about historical things and archaeological things, perhaps something buried and forgotten and dug up again, something that tells us about times long forgotten. Certainly a relic is something of historical import or interest, and it's often used when we think about remains of somebody holy or somebody important to a religion, particularly in Christianity. Reliquaries are the coffers in which they hold bones of saints or purported bones of saints, little bits of the cross, again allegedly little pieces of the cross, or the spear of destiny, and all sorts of other things. If you're a fan of conspiracy theories, you'll be well aware of reliquaries and what they can do. If not, why don't you go and look it up, pal? It might be good for you. Now let's look at the next stanza. So, yes, I am here just as last year, and the sea breathes brine from its strange straight line, up hither the same as when we four came. But 2 have wandered far from this grassy rise into urban roar where no picnics are, and 1 has shut her eyes for evermore. Now, rhyming couplets, where 2 lines together rhyme, so here, year, brine line, same came. Okay, using those potentially speeds up the pace. When I read it, I wanted to dash through it. I didn't want to pause, and that's an effect of either the punctuation, of which there is very little in those first 6 lines, or the rhyme. It picks up pace and it starts to put impact. But that first word, yes, who's he talking to? If you've done your research, you'll know that this is one of the poems that Thomas Hardy wrote to his late wife Emma as he worked through his grieving process on paper. And this is one of the last poems that he wrote. So it's a reflective poem almost. Yes, I am here. So perhaps he's talking to God, or perhaps he's talking to the world in general, or perhaps he's talking to the one who has shut her eyes for evermore. Who knows? Well, you should by now. Let's hope you do. And the sea breathed brine from its strange straight line. Again, lots of alliteration. Remember what I said about the last verse when we were thinking about how that alliteration echoes the sound of waves as they whiz backwards and forwards on the beach, and the rhythmic bowing and mooing of the waves, so whoosh, whoosh, backwards and forwards. And the sea breathes brine from its strange straight line. There's a rhythm to those lines that you should be able to feel as I'm saying it. And I know I sound silly, but listen to it carefully. Try it for yourself when no one's watching. You'll be surprised what you come across. Up hither the same as when we four came. So up hither. Hither means over there. So he's saying that the sounds and the situation is very similar, or is the same, as when he came up here with 3 friends for a picnic. But he then goes on to talk about what's happened to the people who were there with him. He says, 2 have wandered far from this grassy rise into urban roar where no picnics are. I'm sure you can figure out what that means. If you've read Island Man, there's a echo there of this poem with urban roar, making that something that you might want to consider contrasting, but Island Man is a poem written in a very much more modern context than this, and the urban roar at that point refers to the North Circular, so I wonder what the urban roar might refer to here. Do you think it's roads and traffic noise? Entirely possible, although Thomas Hardy was born well before cars were a particularly popular sight. By the time he died they were very common indeed, and so thinking about the noise and busy bustle and sounds that you might find in a major city like London or Birmingham or Manchester, that might be worth thinking about. So 2 of them have moved away, and one, probably Emma, has shut her eyes for evermore. A periphrasis is an excessive use of too much language to say something, and one has shut her eyes for evermore, i.e. died. Why does he use this here? The whole poem is about him making a pilgrimage to the top of a cliff where there is a site where himself, his wife and 2 friends went on a picnic one day, and he has happy memories of that place. Now he's going back and it's winter time. The circle where he and probably lots of other people had lit a little fire when they got up there is still there to be seen. So it's obviously a place where lots of people come to. And he stands there in the wind and the blustery day, listening to the waves beat against the shore at the bottom of the cliff, listening to the wind in the grass and reflecting on what has passed. So this is a poem of reminiscence. And this is a poem with a horrible tone of sadness if you think about it. He's thinking about all the things he's lost. And maybe there's a little pitiful tone, but also maybe this has a tone of closure to it too. That's when you need to decide for yourself and look for the evidence. So that's me done. This is where the picnic was. And I hope at least I've got you thinking about the contents of the poem and how you could possibly talk about it. Finally, I want to talk about what you could say in an exam about this poem. So the poem is a way for the poet to convey his feelings about a particular place and how that sparks memories within him and how it causes reflection. And in his poetry, he's exercised that reflection. The irregular but still somewhat regular rhyme scheme that this poem presents is a way of mapping the way his ideas are jumping around all over the place and how his memories hop from one thing to another. If you studied Presents from My Aunts in Pakistan, it's a familiar technique to you, because the odd line that's dropped in those, like my aunts requested Marks and Spencer's cardigans, is very similar to the way his thought processes kind of trundle around here, except here it's a little bit more structured in that each verse presents a next step, almost like climbing up to the conclusion of the poem. Finally, you should write about devices and word choices. There are some old-fashioned word choices here, and there are some interesting uses of sound effect and imagery. So when you go through this with your teacher in class, make sure that you annotate for those things and that you're looking for the use of imagery and special effects. Also think about poetic devices. I've talked about alliteration, but there are way more than that in here. So have a really good look and see what you can see. And I hope you've enjoyed this poem, and I hope this podcast has been helpful to you.